Pada Paramahansa Privrajacharya Ashtotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Srila Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai Nitya Pravishtom Vishnupada Vaishnava Sarvabhaum Srila Jagannathas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Vaishnav Guru Varga Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 20, Text 30 and 31, because 30 does not have a purport. Anyonya Shlesha Yotunga. It's Bhagavad Gita? Okay, let's try again. Ananya Shlesha Yotunga Nirantara Payodharam Sunasam Sudvijam Snigdha Hasalila Valokanam Ananya Shlesha Yotunga Nirantara Payodharam Sunasam Sudvijam Snigdha Hasalila Valokanam Anyonya Shleshayotunga Nirantara Payodharam Sunasam Sudvijam Snigdha Hasalila Valokanam Ananya Shleshayotunga Yantara Payodharam Sam Sudvijam Snigdha Hasalila Valokanam Ananya Shleshayotunga Nirantara Payodharam Sunasam Sudvijam Snigdha Hasalila Valokanam Shleshayotunga Nirantara Payodharam Sunasam Sudvijam Snigdha Hasalila Valokanam Ananya Shleshatyotunga Nirantara Payodharam Sunasam Sudvijam Snigdha Hasalila Valokanam Anyonya to each other Shleshaya because of clinging Utunga raised Nirantara without intervening space. Payaha dharam, breasts. Sunasam, shapely nose. Sudvijam, beautiful teeth. Snigdha, lovely. Hasa, smile. Leela avalokanam, sportful glance. Translation. Her breasts projected upwards because of their clinging to each other, and they were too contiguous to admit any intervening space. She had a shapely nose and beautiful teeth. A lovely smile played on her lips, and she cast a sportful glance at the Asuras. So that's text 30. Now text 31. Guhantim vridayatmanam. We'll just go through it once. Guhantim vridayatmanam. Does anyone know about? Okay. If no one has it, I can just read it out. That's all right. Nila laka varutinim uppalabhya sura dharma sarve sammu muhustriyam. And then I'll just read the word for word. Guhantim, which is hiding. We can repeat that? Yeah. Vridaya, out of shyness. Atmanam, herself. Nila, dark. Alaka, hair. Varutinim, a bunch. Upalabhya, upon imagining. Asuraha, the demons. Dharma, O Vidura. Sarve, all. Sammumuhu, were captivated. Striyam, women. And then translation. Adorned with dark tresses, she hid herself, as it were, out of shyness. Upon seeing that girl, the Asuras were all infatuated with an appetite for sex. Purport. The difference between demons and demigods is that a beautiful woman very easily attracts the minds of demons, but she cannot attract the mind of a godly person. A godly person is full of knowledge, and a demoniac person is full of ignorance. Just as a child is attracted by a beautiful doll, similarly, a demon who is less intelligent and full of ignorance is attracted by material beauty and an appetite for sex. The godly person knows that this is nicely dressed and ornamented attraction of high breasts, high hips, beautiful nose, and fair complexion is Maya. All the beauty a woman can display is only a combination of flesh and blood. Sri Shankaracharya has devised all persons not to be attracted by the interaction of flesh and blood. They should be attracted by the real beauty in spiritual life. The real beauty is Krishna and Radha. One who is attracted by the beauty of Radha and Krishna cannot be attracted by the false beauty of this material world. That is the difference between a demon and a godly person or devotee. And again, the translation. Adorned with dark tresses, she hid herself, as it were, out of shyness. Upon seeing that girl, the Asuras were all infatuated with an appetite for sex. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I was speaking with Sriman Nrsimha Prabhu maybe 10 minutes ago, and he said a little bit of a difficult text because, of course, it's describing very intense things. But there's something I was reflecting on as we've been going through this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam with this whole thing, and reminded me of the question Kamsari Prabhu asked yesterday about these wonderful descriptions, right? We're hearing words that often we hear that are used to describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? And instead we're hearing them now being used, well, not to describe, right, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees. So it's something interesting. Of course, we'll read later on in this chapter, in text 37, we'll read Srila Prabhupada, he writes, that the Asuras, clouded in their understanding, took the evening twilight to be a beautiful woman, showing herself in her alluring form, and they seized her, right? And what's interesting here is we can see here the Asuras, they're almost conceptualizing this form, right? That's why Prabhupada, he's writing, clouded in their understanding. They took it to be a beautiful woman, right? So we can see here that this whole sort of description is a description almost of an illusory form, right? So Srimad Bhagavatam is describing, we could say almost, the conception that the demons are having of the twilight, right? And what I find interesting with that is it sort of gives almost a psychology of material lust, right? We're seeing all of these grand descriptions, right, that we normally have reserved for the Supreme Personality. Or we have all of these wonderful, beautiful descriptions, right? It almost seems out of place in Bhagavatam, right? To hear about this very lustful form of a woman, right? It sort of reminds me, Radhanath Maharaj, he would make this joke about, we all know Pururava, right? And we know his pastimes they had in the 9th canto, right? And we know Srila Prabhupada, he ended his earthly pastimes when he got up to chapter 14, I think of 10th canto, 13 or 14, I always get mixed up which one. And Srila Prabhupada finished there, right? So for a while, until the disciples of Srila Prabhupada finished the Srimad Bhagavatam, they only had up to canto 10, first few chapters, Brahma Vimohan Leela, basically, right? So Radhanath Maharaj, he would say everyone was really confused about the pastimes of Pururava, because we know his pastimes finish in the 11th canto, right? So without the 11th canto, it seems like Srimad Bhagavatam talks about this man who gets very, very lusty, does a few yagyas, goes off and enjoys, and that's the end of the story, right? So it seems a little bit out of the way, right? But of course we know Srimad Bhagavatam is so transcendental. Every single word has so many infinite meanings. Madhavananda Prabhu, I once heard him give class on one text, I forgot which one in the first canto. And he was just speaking, I think it was like a seminar, and for hours and hours and hours, he was speaking on 2 words. Just the 2 words, he was pulling all the different layers of meaning, right? So Srimad Bhagavatam does not have any detours, it doesn't have any sort of out-of-the-way things. And one way that I find this section, of the many ways, right, that it particularly speaks to me, I think is it reveals the psychology of mundane attraction, right? Because what do we see? Again, we're hearing all of these opulent descriptions. And Srila Prabhupada himself in the purport, what does he describe? He talks about how we should only be attracted to the real beauty of Radha and Krishna, right? And this is interesting, because this is reflecting a more advanced understanding of desire and all of these things. The Mayavad conception is always a little bit weird, right? Or any impersonalist conception. Why is there all of this desire for sinful activity, right? You can't really explain it. Why does one day God himself decide, okay, maybe I want to have this really strong attraction, right, to sinful activities? Also, you'll find in the Christian world, they struggle a bit. It's a real big issue for them, right? How could there be this sort of malfunctioning, right? You'll see this is a big meditation. Saint Augustine, he's a very famous Christian saint, and he's famous for being very hedonistic before he became a very saintly person, right? He has this book called, or the Confessions of Saint Augustine, and he's confessing his whole life, right, up until his moment. And the most famous symbol you'll see often, if you ever waste your time walking through a bookstore, you'll see on the covers of the translations, they'll either be blank, boring covers, or they'll have a photo of a pear with a bite in it. Maybe you've heard the story before of Augustine and the pear. What happened was, when he was a teenager, he was going around with his friends, and he was from a rich background. Actually, it's really interesting to read his psychology, because in many ways it's so interesting to what it is today. He talks about 2,000 years ago. It's very interesting. You get to see how somebody's mind works. He talks about how, later on when he becomes a devout person, he talks about how he wants to run off and become a monk, but his parents are worried for his career, so they send him off to a special university, and all these interesting things. I just found it interesting how you have all these sort of very similar dynamics, right? The worry of a parent, the anxieties of a child trying to figure himself out. Anyway, so it's an interesting book, and he talks about when he was there with his friends. And they were walking around. He came from a very affluent family, like they were very financially stable. So he didn't struggle for food or anything. But with his friends, they jumped over a fence, and they took a pear. They took a pear off a tree, they took a bite, and then they chucked it away. So they stole the pear, and then they ate from it, and then they just threw the pear away. And Augustine said this event stuck with him his whole life. So he thought, why did I do that? What did I have to gain? I have more than enough pears at home, right? I can eat as many pears as I want at home. I didn't even finish that pear. I wasn't even hungry. It wasn't a question of time. I took one bite and I threw it away. And so he sat down with that for a while, and he built actually his whole belief system. Augustine's probably, not to tangent off into a history lesson, but Augustine's probably one of the most influential figures in Christian history. All of the Christians in the Western world are influenced more by Augustine than Jesus or anyone else. Right? And so that's why you'll find if you're in book distribution or something, you'll see Christians, sometimes they'll come up to you, and they'll say, you're a sinner, you're imperfect, you know what I mean? Everything you do is evil, like this. Nothing you can do will ever be good. This is all coming from Augustine. Because Augustine was so much stuck with this event. Why did I want to steal the pear? Why did I want to steal it? That he ended up creating this whole belief system, that from my very first moment, I'm the most evil person. All that I want to do is evil. Right? It came from this experience. And it's a very powerful experience. We've all had, or at least I've definitely had moments like that, where I'll just do something that's wrong for no reason besides it's just a little bit exciting, right? There's something within us that sort of wants to do all of these misguided, sinful activities. And so it's very difficult to understand, why do we want to do these things? We can understand that they're wrong. Virtually every culture has, right? You won't find any culture on earth where they don't have some idea of morality, of prayaschitta, of atonement. All of them have this conception, right? You won't find any that don't. So all of us can understand it's wrong. But we don't understand why it's wrong, and we don't understand what the root cause of it is. And that's why you end up having all sorts of difficult issues. You have all of these repressed religions, right? Where what they'll do, you'll see sometimes, especially in the Middle Ages, you'll still see in some countries today, they'll say, I'm very sinful, so what they'll do is they'll take like whips and they'll whip themselves, right? Mother Teresa, she would wear a shirt, and inside was raw leather, so it would rub against her side, and it would cause constant bleeding, and it would cause the wounds not to heal. Like this they would do. You still see it in Iran, you'll see. The Shia Muslims, what they'll do on a certain day, I always forget the name of the day, but on the day they'll go around on the streets and they'll just cut themselves. And you'll see just blood everywhere if you see the videos, right? Because there's all of these ideas, because they feel like there's this guilt, right? And they don't know what to do with it, right? Because they don't know where it comes from either. So there's this idea, then people will do extreme atonement, right? Why? Because they can never satisfy that urge, and they'll keep on doing it, keep on doing it, right? And so you have this terrible predicament, right? Where people, they're doing these bad things, they know they're bad, but they don't know how to satisfy them. And therefore they're stuck in a loop. I do a bad thing, so I want forgiveness. But then I do it again. So maybe I'm wasting this forgiveness. I should do something more extreme. And it's like a cycle, and it goes more. In the Philippines, you'll see what they do. And the churches tell them not to do it, but they still do it. On Easter, they'll actually crucify someone. They'll actually get a member of the village, And he will volunteer. He'll want to. He'll think this is a great honor. I can do something pious in my life. And they'll take a cross. We all know crucifixion, right? On the cross, right? So they'll take a cross and they'll take a member and they'll take him and they'll nail his hands in and they'll carry him around the city like that. One Australian TV presenter, he visited the Philippines and he said, I wanted to showcase this, right? And because obviously he wanted views for his show because, you know, there's a Maya, we want to watch somebody getting crucified. So he went, this Australian guy, he went and he got crucified himself and they carried him around. And you can still see him today. One of our religious studies professors showed us a video. He still has a limp to this day because they nailed his leg into the cross as well. So anyway, so all sorts of extreme things people will do, right? Srila Prabhupada, we know he gives a wonderful example from Srimad Bhagavatam, right? In Nectar of Instruction regarding this. The elephant that washes itself and then gets muddy afterwards, right? But then it's human psychology. We'll think, that worked last time, but now I've done not only have I had the sin of doing the activity, now I've done the sin of doing the activity, getting forgiven, and doing it again. I need something bigger, right? So like this, the cycle keeps on going on and on and on and on. And very little philosophies will be able to give an explanation why, right? Why do we have all of these desires? Some will say, like in Buddhist philosophy, that it's come up from our body, right? This is it's almost hard to believe because desire is such the primary aspect of our existence, right? Everything we do because we desire, right? But Krishna consciousness has the answer to that question, right? Desire is the ultimate reality we have. Our jiva, our soul, one aspect of it is of course consciousness. But Jiva Goswami, he lists the different inherent aspects of the soul, right? And the aspects are of course consciousness, right? The other is that it's self-effulgent. What does this mean? Self-effulgent means it doesn't need anything else to light itself up, right? This table, in order to be seen, in order to experience consciousness, I need to be conscious of it. So this table is not self-effulgent, right? But my consciousness is, right? In the same way that a torch, right? A torch does not need any external light to be able to see. It's the same with consciousness. So this is another quality that's listed. Another quality is the ability to say I, right? And of course we'll think, oh, well, this is the false ego. No, the false ego is when we incorrectly say I. Then we generate that element. But the actual basic ability to say I is an inherent aspect of the soul. We know again in the spiritual world. Whenever we get there, we'll all be saying I, right? But what will we be saying? We won't be saying I am this, I am that. We'll be saying I am Krishna Das, right? So the ability to say I is another aspect of the soul. And the last aspect, well, there's a few other ones, but the last one that I'll be listing today is desire. The ability to want, the ability to desire is an inherent part of the soul. Jiva Goswami, he describes it as like a magnet and iron filings, right? We know when you take iron, I'm sure maybe we did in high school, we did a science experiment. You take the magnet, right? And then you can move the iron, even if there's an object in between, right? You can move it around. Jiva Goswami uses this example, right, of magnetism to describe the way the soul relates to the material universe. The soul is the magnet, the iron is the material elements, and desire is the magnetic influence. The whole way that this soul interacts with this world is through desire. It desires something and then it moves. This is also how we can understand that jiva is completely pure. It's a spiritual potency, right? It's marginal, but when we can break it into three, but if we break it into two, it pops onto the transcendental side of things, right? So how can it be in touch with this material world? Actually, it's never in touch. It's the desires that interact through it, right? In this way, the jiva exists in the world, it affects the world, but it never touches the world. So like this, we find that desire is an inherent nature of the jiva. And therefore, why do people do bad things? Is because they've misdirected their desire. That's simply it. We can think of St. Augustine, right? Well, why did he steal that pear? I mean, I don't know truly, but you could speculate that it's, philosophically speculate, that is, not mentally speculate. You can speculate that it's maybe some desire for adventure, right? And where is that desire most fulfilled in? It's fulfilled in Krishna, running around, jumping on Kaliya's heads, right? We can find that is a greater fulfillment of it. But away from Krishna consciousness, what did he have? He had nothing but a material world, and so he created this sinful adventure, right? In order to satisfy that desire for the Viras, right? We know the same thing here. What is this lust? This lust is that natural desire to appreciate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's this natural desire to appreciate the pastimes of Krishna, but it's being directed towards the material world, and therefore we're hearing these wonderful depictions of what the demons are seeing in the shadow. And that's why it's very nice that Srimad Bhagavatam concludes this narration with saying, right, this was simply a shadow, and look how wonderful they found it. But they didn't find it wonderful because there was anything wrong with them inherently. Inherently, their desire was proper, even of the demons. Everyone's desire is proper. We know that desire is the desire to enjoy, the desire to be satisfied. That is a proper and good desire. But again, it's only properly achieved in Krishna. So we see this is the general nature. Of course, sometimes we'll find what Srila Prabhupada points out in the purport, right? That the difference between the demon and the demigod is that a beautiful woman very easily attracts the minds of demons, right? But she cannot attract the mind of a godly person. This is a very interesting principle, and we see this all the time, right? We'll see great devotees, they're not agitated by anything. We know, of course, the famous pastime Haridas Thakur chanting with the prostitute, right? And then eventually she became a great devotee herself, right? So like this, we'll see. The reason for this is because, of course, the godly person is satisfied in the worship of Krishna. I was talking to one bhakta I've been preaching to, and actually it's very interesting. He came to Janmashtami and he was just speaking about how excited he was. And me and Mrigang Prabhu, because we were the first people to preach to him, Mrigang Prabhu, he made a joke, but I felt that it was a joke that was funny because it was true. He said, Prabhu, I remember when we were preaching to you, but now you're the one preaching to us, right? Because he's so fired up, right? He was doing full Nirjal fast, right? And so he was preaching, he said, wow, as long as there's kirtan, I can go on forever. And we were thinking, Prabhu, all I've been thinking about all day is how the midnight feast is going to be. So anyway, so he was preaching, right? He was preaching to us very strong. But I remember I was speaking to him, and he has a degree in Christian theology, right? And he still has a bit of the upadhi. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, right? But he was saying something very nice. He was speaking about how we know in the Abrahamic traditions, right? Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they don't like idolatry, right? And they make a big emphasis on it, right? Don't draw any image of God. Don't draw any image, even of God's representatives, right? Christians don't follow that, but Jews and Muslims do, right? Don't draw them, right? Of course, to the Vaishnav mindset, this is a little confusing, right? Because, we very much like to draw everything, right? And then forget about drawing, we can see the Supreme Lord's form himself, right? In the form of the Murti. And so I was speaking to him, and I was always wondering, because I was speaking out loud, I was thinking, this rule never made sense, because I can see Dhanurdhar Maharaj, he talks about when he preaches in Muslim countries, right? The Muslim devotees, they will sometimes struggle because they have this samskar, right? Of there can be no form. So I was speaking with him, and I was just thinking out loud. I was curious. Why is this there? Because we know, of course, Jesus Christ, Hazrat Muhammad, Srila Prabhupada says such nice things about them, right? He says they're bona fide representatives of the Lord, and they're doing some sort of bridge preaching, if you will, right? And so I was curious. I was thinking, why was this rule there, right? If this is a bona fide system, we can see quite clearly that this wasn't some innovation. This was there in the original teachings. So why is this there? Anyway, so he was saying, and he came up with his speculation, right? But I thought it was a speculation that was based on a very deep truth. And he said, because none of them were ready to hear about the form of Krishna, right? Because none of them were ready to hear about the form of Krishna, then naturally they would take this desire and create some sort of material form and worship that instead, right? Because they hadn't been exposed to the form of Krishna, then for that reason they had to be told not to do it, because they would take this natural desire, right, for form, and they would worship something else. They would worship something incorrectly. They would worship some object of their lust, right? Because we know deity worship, all forms of worship, they're so heavily regulated in order to prevent this, right? But if you don't have that sufficient knowledge, then all that will happen is you'll project your lust outwards, right? We see this even happens, unfortunately, sometimes with deity worship, right? Not, of course, lust in the sexual sense, but lust in the general material sense, right? Desire to do something wrong. We know the very famous incident in Vrindavan once. One person gave a bit of money to one of the pujaris. He wanted Krishna to be dressed differently that day. And we know this, right? He dressed the deity in jeans, and instead of a flute, he put a mobile phone in his hand, right? Just for a bit of money. There was like riots in Vrindavan, right? But we can see, right? If the danger is even there, right? Even in Vaishnav temples, and what to say in places that don't even know about the form of the Lord. And then he made another point, which I thought also was very sweet. He said, but the reason why we don't hear these things in Vedic systems, the Vedic system doesn't have any admonishment, right, of idolatry, is because who would want to go to idolatry if they've heard of the beautiful form of Krishna, right? That danger does not exist once somebody has heard about the form of Krishna. Who can hear about Krishna and think anything else but, oh, I want to worship this personality, right? Who can truly hear and understand about Krishna and think that, right? So therefore, the risk of idolatry is not so strong there, right? Of course, by offenses, one might go away, but that risk is not so strong that there needs to be this strict ban. So we hear this material world, it's all working by this misdirected but very valid desire. But it's an interesting principle that Srila Prabhupada mentions, right? That the demons and demigods, well, neither are confused. Because we find in Krishna's pastimes, right? We find in Krishna's pastimes that sometimes the opposite happens. Can anyone think of the time where the opposite happens? That the godly people are attracted, in fact, to a beautiful woman. You can think of Putana, right? Because we know Putana, she walks in and what happens? All of the Vrajvasis, they so wonderfully, they see her and they think, wow, what a beautiful person, right? All of the cowherd women, they see her and they think, wow, she's so beautiful, surely she must feed Krishna, right? So it's a little bit confusing. Actually, it's not very confusing, because actually it's completely different. It's night and day, right? Because this bewilderment that we're hearing in the purport is the bewilderment of Mahamaya, right? Of the external energy. But in Putana's time, that was the Yoga Maya. Krishna wanted the Vrajvasis to bring her in. There's a few reasons given why. My spiritual master, he says one of the main reasons is Krishna wanted to protect the other children in Vrindavan. So he wanted Putana to come to in the Vrindavan area. So he wanted Putana to come in quickly, right? Come quickly into this area. Come first here. So with the Yoga Maya, he arranged it so that she would come in, because Krishna wanted to kill her before she could do significant damage. This is one reason that's given, right? And so very naturally, Putana, she comes in. And how is she allowed in? We know very famously in Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, she is allowed in and she looks dressed perfectly, right? To be a cowherd woman. Very, very beautiful. Rohini and Mother Jashoda, they're there in the room taking care of Krishna, and they think, wow, surely you must feed Krishna. Surely you must feed him. Like this, she says, they say. And so she goes forth, right? And Krishna, of course, what does he do? What does he do before he drinks from Putana? Does anyone remember? He closes his eyes, right? There's a few reasons. Actually, I once counted. It's very much in the double digits. It's in the several double digits of explanations that are given why he closes his eyes. Some of my favorites are, one is that he closes his eyes and he prays to Shiva, right? Because he prays to Shiva and he says, Shiva, you are the one who drank all of the poison out of the ocean, right? Now I'm about to drink now I'm about to drink some poison. You please bless me so that I am able to survive this. This is Krishna very much playing the role of a human now in this way. Another reason given why is Krishna was thinking, actually it's very sinful. We know actually Krishna very sinfully kills demons, right? He's killing cows. Here he's killing a woman, right? So you think it's very sinful for me to kill a woman, right? Very sinful. So he's closing his eyes thinking, I don't want to see this. Right? Another reason that's given is we know there's demigods presiding over each eye. And we know for demigods to see demons is very, they're like, it's like, you can think Australia, New Zealand, right? There's a bit of tension. Australia, New Zealand's a bad example. We can think Israel, Palestine or something. Right? We can think of this. There's a lot of tension. So he didn't want the demigods presiding over the eyes to see this demonic form, so he closes his eyes. Another reason given is he's thinking, sometimes when we eat and we're going to eat something that's not so very nice, we close our eyes, right? I still remember once, I say this story, I've said it a few times in a few Bhaktam classes. I was visiting one devotee's family, not from here. And the one devotee, he was very proud of how his upma is, right? And he was telling me, Prabhu, you have to have my upma. And I was thinking, okay, Prabhu, I was very excited to have it. I like upma, right? So I was very excited to have it, and he cooked the really big upma. He loaded on my plate, and I'd heard, he'd been telling me this whole time that everyone loves his upma. So I was thinking, Come on, load it up, Prabhu. I was telling him, keep on going on the plate, keep on going on the plate. Anyway, so I was very much excited for this upma. And I went to eat the upma. And the first bite in, it was the driest, blandest upma I've ever had. And I thought, okay. So I did exactly this. I sort of just closed my eyes. I thought, Hare Krishna. I was thinking of Krishna. And I just kept on going. And I went, but because I went so quickly, right? He said, oh, you like it so much. And then he put another spoon on my plate. And I thought, oh, Krishna. So I closed my eyes again and I kept on going, right? So what does Krishna like to eat, right? Of course, I was being very picky. I should be very blessed to have had prasadam, right? But what to do? My sense gratification mind kicked in. But what does Krishna like to eat? When Krishna is breastfed, we know in Damodar pastime, why does he go? Why does he go and does he drink from Mother Jashoda? Is it that the Supreme Lord needs milk? He goes because he wants the devotion. He wants the devotion. That's what he eats. There's Danodar Maharaj. He also says this one other pastime. He was reading, not a pastime, just a story. He was going through the market in Vrindavan, and he saw a little magazine written by one of the Babajis there. This is a very conservative Babaji, right? Very conservative line. So only Brahmins can be gurus, stuff like that. Only people born Brahmins can be gurus. Very, hyper conservative, right? So he was just flicking through. I can't remember why he was waiting for someone. He was flicking through. And he read the Q&A at the end. And he was very surprised, right? Because, of course, this Brahmin, this Babaji had a reputation for being conservative to the level of contradicting the Shastras, right? Because the Shastras are very clear. You don't need to be born a Brahmin to be a guru, right? But he said he was very surprised that this one answer was very correct that he gave. Somebody asked him, can I cook pizza to serve to Krishna? And his response was, if you feel you can put better love and devotion in cooking a pizza than cooking a paratha, then cook the pizza, right? Because Krishna eats the devotion. He eats the struggle. He doesn't eat the actual quality of the offering. So anyway, so like this we hear that Krishna, he's eating the devotion, right? So what is Krishna about to eat now from Putana? Is it devotion? Is it love and devotion? No. It's a very disgusting meal. So he closes his eyes because he's thinking, I don't want to have to taste this disgusting meal, right, of hatred for me and my devotees. Like this we hear all sorts of descriptions. I was hearing my spiritual master give katha and he spoke. I was expecting it to be 5 minutes. It ended up being like an hour. He was going all the different explanations we can have, right? So, but in this way, Putana, she comes in, and of course she's purified, right? So in this way we find Yogamaya has arranged it that she can be brought in, right? So it's a very interesting example. It's the one time we find a demon go in and is accepted. Other times the demons go in and they're not so much accepted, right? Or at least they're not so much accepted to be beautiful, right? We find the other demons maybe are seen as a big cave or something or another. And actually this comes up, do we know, when does the Vraj Leela of Krishna end? Does anyone know? When Akrura comes is actually, in some senses, that's already into the end of the Vraj Leela. There's one specific point, and it's written in the purports. Also, my spiritual master also says that, but it's also written in the purports. This is the point where the Vraj Leela had come to a close. Is actually when Krishna kills the Arishtasur demon. Before he kills Keshi and Vyomasur, when he kills this demon, it's described Narada Muni, he sees this, and Narada Muni at this point, he knows Krishna's Vraj Leelas are coming to an end. So actually Krishna's Leelas, they end. Krishna's Leela in Vraj, it doesn't end perfectly. It doesn't end, no, I shouldn't say perfectly, it doesn't end cleanly, right? It begins to end slowly, and then he'll kill the last two demons, right? But actually when he kills the last two demons, already the Vraj Leela is ending, right? Because who properly ends the Leelas? It's, as Prabhu said, it's Akrura, right? But Akrura, he's already traveling. He's already traveling down to Vraj, while Keshi and Vyoma are in Vraj, right? Actually, they haven't been killed yet, right? While he's arriving. So actually, the chapters are out of order. We see the chapters so that smoothly the Vraj Leela can be ended. But actually, the chapters which describe the killing of the Keshi demon and Akrura's travels, they're happening at the same time, because Kamsa sends then. Right? Narada Muni, he sees this killing of Arishtasur demon, and he says, okay, now this is the end of Krishna's Vraj Leela. Now he has to go to kill Kamsa. So that's why he goes, and we know, we know Narad Muni actually. Sometimes you read him in different pastimes and you think, Narad Muni, which side are you on, right? You hear him speaking and you're thinking, Narad Muni, are you a demigod or a demon? Which side are you batting for, right? Often you can hear this, but of course we know he's simply stirring up the pot for Krishna's Leelas, right? At this point, this is the point where he goes to Kamsa, right? And he makes the big revelation to Kamsa, right? And he tells Kamsa, oh Kamsa, Balaram and Krishna, they were taken by Vasudeva, right? They were taken away. Of course, interestingly enough though, Balaram wasn't. But it's interesting, Srimad Bhagavatam, Narad Muni says that. He says Ram and Krishna both were taken. So it's a little bit confusing. Why does he mention both? Actually, it's mentioned or it's described that the reason why Narad Muni says that is because Balaram needed to come as well. Balaram also needed to enact this pastime of killing the wrestlers. So because of this reason, Narad Muni, he mentions Balaram as well as Krishna, right? Because he's trying to allow the pastime to be enacted, right? Because actually it wasn't the case that both were taken. It was only Krishna that was taken. We know that actually moved from one womb to the other, right? So, like this, we find Narad Muni, he's describing this to Kamsa. And so Kamsa, we know he gets very angry, right? He pulls out his sword, he gets ready, and he says, I'm going to kill Vasudeva, right? And then what does Narad Muni say? Does anyone know which word does he use to describe Vasudeva's actions? They were out of fear. He says, Vasudeva, he acted out of fear. Vasudeva acted out of fear. That's why he took the children away. He said the fearful Vasudeva did this, right? And why does he say this? He says this because Kamsa is about to try to kill Vasudeva. And Narad Muni, even though sometimes it seems like it's unclear which side he's on, ultimately, of course, he's on Krishna's side. He's such a great devotee, right? So why does he say this? He says this because then Kamsa, evil as he is, he's still some sort of Kshatriya, right? He still has some of that Kshatriya honor. And he's saying, Vasudeva is such a coward, running off in the middle of the night with his children. What a cowardly person. You would be considered a coward as well if you were to go kill them. So therefore he describes him as fearful. He says, fearfully Vasudeva, he took his children. Fearfully he took them. You would be a coward to do it. We know this with Kali Yuga, right? Being banished by Parikshit Maharaj, right? I mean, here we have Parikshit Maharaj, such a great personality. We have Kali Yuga, such an evil personality. And the moment he comes pathetically and surrenders to him, Parikshit Maharaj can do nothing, right? So it's the same with Kamsa. Kamsa has his Kshatriya pride appealed to. And he says, okay, then I will not kill the coward. But then he says, but I will kill Nanda Maharaj, right? And so he goes then to try and say, I will kill Nanda Maharaj instead. And so he says the same thing. Narada Muni, he says, why would you kill Nanda Maharaj? What has he done? It's Vasudeva who's betrayed your trust. Nanda Maharaj has simply taken him in. What does he know? He's innocent. Then people would still call you a coward for just killing him, right? And then Kamsa, he thought, oh, okay. Okay, now I'm not sure what I'll do, right? And then he goes back and he says, okay, then I will kill Vasudeva, right? Then I will kill him. But then Narad Muni, he says, well, if you kill Vasudeva, then Nanda Maharaj, he will hear about this. And when Nanda Maharaj hears that you've killed Vasudeva, he will take Krishna and Balaram and he will know they are in full danger. And he will train them up to be so strong and then they will kill you. And then Kamsa, he says, oh, that's easy. I have so many spies in Vrindavan. I have so many spies in Vrindavan, so many demons that are there. What I will do, I will send a demon to kill Krishna and I will kill Vasudeva. And Narad Muni, he says, yeah, going to send a demon to kill Krishna in Vrindavan, that's a plan that's worked out very well for you so far, you know. Try it one more time, let's see how it goes, right? And he does try it again. Our acharyas, they comment on this. Even though Narad Muni has made this implication, right? Narad Muni has said this, what is the point of sending another demon? None of it has worked out so far. Still he sends the Keshi demon. This is a sign of the demonic mentality. Again, lusting after the twilight, right? This is what the demonic tendency leads to. Same with Kamsa, right? Demonically, he's wanting to kill Krishna, and so he's lost his intelligence completely. He knows that Keshi will be killed, right? And still he sends him across. This is what the infatuation with demonic tendencies does. So like this, he keeps on going. So then he thinks, oh, well, now what do I do? And then Narad Muni, finally, to prove his point, right? To get his point across, to show what he needs done, he says, how about you do it this way? It is foolish to kill anyone else but the person who's going to kill you, right? The person who's going to kill you is Krishna and Balaram, right? They're the people, well, actually Krishna, right? But he's mentioning Balaram as well because he wants Balaram to be brought as well, right? The person who's going to kill you is Krishna, right? So why don't you just kill him, right? Just go directly and kill him. And then he says, well, that's what else have I been trying to do? This whole time I've been trying to have him killed with all of these demons, right? So then what Narad Muni says, how about you throw some big arena, right? You throw some big competition, right? Throw some big competition, have your best soldiers there. And you know what else you should do? You should imprison Devaki and Vasudev, right? Because then Krishna and Balaram, they will be held by their deep compassion, their deep love for their parents, and they'll be forced to come to you, right? You've been losing this whole time because you've been fighting on their turf. Now make them come to your home ground, and then you will win. Then you will be able to kill them, like this Narad Muni says. Of course, some people then they'll say, why did Narad Muni throw in this detail of Devaki and Vasudev being locked up, right? Well, why put that detail in, right? My spiritual master, he says that the reason why this was done was because Devaki and Vasudev, I mean, how long did they pray? How many austerities did they do in their previous lives? Actually, it wasn't them. It's a little bit complicated. It was an anksha of them who did it and then merged back into them, right? But so many austerities they did. And they did all of these austerities. Why? Because they wanted to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what happened? They saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead for 1 second and then he left, right? So Narad Muni, actually it was his mercy that he told for them to be locked up. Because from the prison cell, they would be able to see, right? Also from being able to rescue, they were able to have more pastimes with the Lord, right? So in this way, Narad Muni, actually it's not that he's just trying to stir up. Actually, that was his mercy as a Vaishnav. That was his mercy that he was putting onto Devaki and Vasudev. By having them locked up. So anyways, like this, Akrura Milan is a long pastime, but like this, we can see. So in this way, Kamsa, he still thinks so. He takes it on board. He thinks, okay, you know what, I'm still going to send the demons because I'm infatuated with my demonic tendencies. But I will send for Akrura to pick up Krishna. I will send him because this is a good plan. The whole reason I've been losing this whole time is because they're not on my home turf. And of course, we know he doesn't actually believe this. Kamsa is fear personified, right? And we'll find as it keeps on going, even before Srila Prabhupada, he has this wonderful phrase in Krishna book where he talks about Kamsa's feelings right before the wrestling in the arena. And he says all the inauspicious omens were happening, including when Kamsa would look in the mirror, he would see that he would have no head, right? And Srila Prabhupada has this wonderful sentence. He says, Kamsa would see that he has no head, even though he did indeed have a head. So it's just a sweet sentence from Srila Prabhupada. So like this, Kamsa, he sends Akrura. And we know Akrura, great personality. He's been there as well, right? And Akrura, it's described actually this whole time, he was hearing all of the pastimes of the Lord. Because he was in the government of Kamsa. So all of the spies who would be reporting back all of these things, of course Kamsa would be hearing them and he would be getting agitated and completely angered, right? By hearing all of the failures, right? But Akrura instead, he heard all of them positively and he would be relishing the Hari Katha he would be receiving. Again, I make this point often, but we hear this when Krishna eventually arrives, right? To kill Kamsa. We hear the whole crowd, they're murmuring among themselves and they're saying, oh, did you hear Balaram killed this demon and Krishna killed this demon? But in Bhagavatam, it gets the details wrong. Balaram is killing demons Krishna killed and Krishna is killing demons Balaram killed, right? Why is this? It's because actually everyone in the area, they were just hearing Hari Katha. All that they would do is all of these reports would come back and the devotees like Akrura, they would be hearing these and they would be repeating them to others. And everyone would simply be relishing Hari Katha right under Kamsa's nose. Right? Everyone would be relishing the pastimes of Krishna. Like this would be happening. So Akrura, he was very happy to go. We know, right? He was very, very happy. And then he started going along and he traveled along. And we know, at this point, Krishna, he's running around trying to fight the Keshi demon. And there's a really interesting point. Because what happens? Akrura, he describes Krishna with a certain name. He describes him with the name Keshava. What does the word Keshava mean? Yes, Master of Brahma and Shiva, that's one. What's another name we can give? Yes, the killer of the Keshi demon, right? So those are two valid names, but what I find interesting is that he calls him the killer of the Keshi demon before he's the killer of the Keshi demon, right? Keshi, he's still running around when Akrura refers to him as Keshava. This is interesting, right? One explanation that's given is, of course, in this sense, he's referring to Keshava, meaning one with the long flowing hair, right? One whose hair grows very wonderfully, very beautifully. Of course, we can also take the Lord of Brahma and Shiva, right? And he uses this, again, why? Because, and I didn't bring up this pastime for no reason, I'm coming back to the purport. Why did he bring this up? Because he was in so much anxiety to see this form of the Lord. To understand the glories of the Lord, we can really see this in a Krura Milan pastime, right? Because what is he thinking as he's going along? What does he say? What great mercy, what great mercy have I received from Kamsa, that I'm able to go now and have darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We know he says, how many sinful activities have been washed away, right? What great deed have I done in order to qualify for this, right? And he thinks, what could I have done? All of these different things are true, but what could I have done? And what does he eventually conclude? What is the only explanation for this? That he received somehow the tiny drop of the mercy of the Vaishnavas. One reason we could say, not certainly, but one way we could say, is because actually when he was in Kamsa's government, he would help cover for Vasudev, right? He would help protect Vasudev. We can consider maybe this is one way that he received the mercy of the Vaishnavas. By helping Vasudev's protection, he obtained that mercy, that he was able to have darshan of the Lord. It is only because of that that we are able to see the Lord. The same thing is said of the tree. We all know there's that one tree that doesn't die. In Kaliya Daman Leela, when Krishna, he gets on top of it, right, to dive in. And why does the tree not die? Because Garuda, right, when Garuda stole the Amrit from the demigods, he stole it and he landed on that tree and a bit, dropped off, right? And therefore the tree was immortal. That's one explanation. But another deeper explanation is, yes, he did receive the Amrit. That tree did receive the Amrit. But it wasn't the Amrit of the demigods. It was the Amrit of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. And because that tree had received the wonderful opportunity of being able to have the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas placed upon it, it was able to survive that poison. And not only was it able to survive that poison, but something even greater. It was able to have the Supreme Personality of Godhead's feet placed upon it. Right? So in the same way we hear Krura, he's praying in this way. He is meditating on this way. Only by having first received the mercy of the Vaishnavas, now I am able to have darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's very interesting. If you read the Akrura pastimes, you see sometimes people, they say, how do I enter into Vrindavan? How can I enter into Vrindavan, such a sacred place? Of course, we go to Mayapur first, right? But another way we can also do is we can study Akrura's pastimes. Danodar Maharaj, he makes this point. He says, when we study these pastimes, we see this is the process by which one enters into Vraj. Because this is exactly what Akrura is doing. Right? He is entering into Vraj. And how do we enter into it? We enter into it firstly by understanding the Siddhanta. Right? We don't enter into it by thinking, wow, Krishna's stories are so sweet and cute. That's not what Akrura says. Akrura knows about the pastimes of Krishna. He's been hearing about them. But what does he say? We all know his prayers, right? He doesn't open up with saying, wow, the Rasa Leela is so cool, I want to see that. No, he says that personality, right, who's, it's called I forgot the Sanskrit now, but there's a Sanskrit word that's used to describe all of Krishna's feet together. Right? When all 10 feet are held together like this, later on I'll find it and I'll look it up again in Bhagavatam. There's a Sanskrit word. When all his feet are together like that, the glow that comes from that, it's a certain formation, right? And he says simply the glow from that formation, simply that glow is what all of the yogis are simply wishing to look at. Simply the glow of the toenails in this formation is what they want to look at. This isn't Ras Leela. This isn't Krishna as a cute, sweet little guy. This is the supreme absolute truth, right? This is what he's understanding. Again, I bring this up because Srila Prabhupada has mentioned Radha and Krishna. This means the very highest form of the Lord. And so Akrura, he's very nicely giving this example. And he says, they are all hankering simply to see the glow of his toenails. I will see the feet themselves. I will be able to pay obeisances to that feet, right? So in this way, Akrura, he's very nicely giving an example of how one enters into Vraj. Right? So like this Akrura, he keeps on going. And he keeps on going and he's very, very grateful for this opportunity. And we know then, at one point, he's very eager to see the hand of the Lord. Right? That's a big part of his prayers. That hand which appoints the demigods, right? Brahma is appointed by that hand, right? Indra is appointed by that hand, right? I mean, forget about the hand, even the feet. We know Bali Maharaj. Everything is taken away and everything was given, right? By those feet in the form of Vamanadev. Right? So this whole body is so transcendental, right? But it's something interesting that's said. When he describes Krishna's hand, what does he describe it doing? He describes it doing all of these opulent things. But we must also understand the sweetness of Krishna to enter into Vraj. And that's what's interesting. Akrura, he understands the philosophy, and then he applies it into the sweetness. Because what does he say? The same hand is wiping away the sweat of the gopis, right? He says this. This is an interesting point. For two reasons. One, it's, again, showing that there should still be some understanding of the sweetness of Krishna. The only time Srila Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, one of the only times, I should say, rather, spoke Radha Katha, intimate Vraj Leela pastimes, was in the Vraj area. And he said, none of you are qualified to hear this, but you'll become Mayavadis if you do not hear it once or twice. You should hear what we are being oriented towards, right? So he spoke it for this purpose. There should also be some understanding that there is sweetness of the Lord. The philosophy is there, and the philosophy is the canvas upon which the sweetness is painted upon, right? So he has some understanding of that sweetness, because now he's referring to those sweet pastimes. But also what's interesting in this text is that it says the same hand which is used to manage the whole world, right? What does that mean? If this is the hand which appoints the demigods, this is the hand which the whole world is surrendering to. That same hand which the whole world is held under, right? That same hand which Krishna uses to dominate reality, right? That same hand which all reality is serving. What is that hand used for? That hand is used to serve his devotees. We hear about the sovereignty of Krishna's hands, the power of Krishna's hands to control everything. Everything dances simply on the fingernail of Krishna's hand, right? But that same hand is then used in Vaishnava Seva, right? So we find the fullness of philosophy here is found. And this is the level of understanding that one should have in order to truly enter into Vrindavan, right? And so Akrura, he's simply praying to have darshan of that hand. And then of course we know Akrura sees that form, and I'm going over time, so we'll end Akrura Milan pastime for today. But we see, when he eventually sees this form, how beautiful his prayers are, right? How wonderfully astonished he is to see that wonderful form of the Lord. Why? Because this form is truly attractive, right, to all of the saintly people, such as Akrura, right? Fully attractive, right? And we can say the same thing about Putana, right? Even though Putana's form, in one sense, is hideous because it was demonic, right? At the end, that body, it smells wonderful, right? Because her body becomes like prasad. Her whole body has been used as an offering to Krishna, right? And in this way, the cowherd boys and girls, right, all of them can accept it very wonderfully, right, as part of the beauty of Krishna, right? Everything that comes into contact with Krishna is beautiful, right? So the Yoga Maya allowed it in order to increase the beauty of Krishna, in order to increase that relishment, right? So in this way, we find the beauty of Krishna, right? The beauty of it. And that is what's truly appreciated, right? Everywhere and anywhere. It doesn't matter which situation one is in. Even if one is like Akrura, quite literally in the government of a demon, right? Like Kamsa. Even in such a situation, one is able to appreciate the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One is able to. And when one is able to, one becomes a great devotee, like Akrura, right? So in this way, we see that ultimately, the nature of the jiva, it is to appreciate beauty. It is to appreciate all of these beautiful things, not all of these coming and going phantasmagorias. And we know Krishna is the ultimate non-coming and non-going. Krishna is the only absolute truth. Prabhupada says this in Krishna book. All truths are relative, and they are only true insofar as they relate to Krishna. Krishna is the only absolute truth. It's also in the Chatur Shloki, right, of Srimad Bhagavatam. Everything doesn't exist. In that sense, we can agree with the Mayavadis. It doesn't exist until it's attached to Krishna. We don't agree how that works. Obviously, we say it doesn't exist because it's temporary, here today, gone tomorrow. But all of that is absolutely only found in Krishna, right? So we can use the desire, that's the inherent part of our jiva, to try to make that which is relative absolute, or we can instead turn to the absolute, like Akrura and eventually Putana did. And in that sense, we can have actual satisfaction. I'll just finish because I think people have to go, but we can talk after. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki